Rattled. That's the nothing personal word of the day. It's Tuesday, June 10th, 2025. Rattled. That is not the position you want to be in when you are 3 games away from winning the Stanley Cup. But the Edmonton Oilers were extremely rattled in Sunrise, Florida. Generally, people in Sunrise, Florida get rattled by the size of the mall. They get rattled by the possibility of alligators in their backyard. They get rattled by the probability of heat stroke. But rattled in the middle of a Stanley Cup series where, while they were, let's say, co-favorites, those slight underdogs, when you head into a game 3 tied at 1, you've lost home ice advantage. You know you've got to get 1 out of the next 2. You've got the best hockey player on the planet currently on skates in Connor McDavid. You've got the confidence, even though you don't have the advantage in goaltending, you don't have the advantage in crowd support, you don't have the advantage in where you're staying. I mean, the hotels in Sunrise, not great. No, I'm just kidding. No one stays in Sunrise. They stay in Fort Lauderdale. But all of a sudden, the game starts. And the one word, as I was going through possible things to talk about as the game was developing, there's no way I thought that the Oilers would ever become rattled. And it became so apparent 1 minute into the game, which is exactly how you don't want to start a road game. An important game 3, where if you win game 3, 23 out of 30 times all time, you are going to win the series when the series is tied at 1. Coke, I'm thinking about that stat. Hold on. Are you saying in the history of the Stanley Cup, only 30 times has a series been tied at 1? That seems not like a lot in terms of all of the Stanley Cups over the years. But anyway, I'm going to assume that that could be correct. So let's just say that 23-7 is your record if you win game 3. Under a minute into the game, and here comes the enemy, Brad Marchand. And the reason I want to talk about Brad is when you acquire a player at the deadline, and he's a player from your rival, the Boston Bruins, he's a player who is despised by not just the fans, but potentially by the players on your team. When you have an opportunity to acquire such a player, that conversation does take place in the front office. Do we want to add this personality, this player to our team? You remember that being an enemy and then being an ally, not all that uncommon. The first name that comes to my mind, and I assume everybody else, though I don't pretend that our brains are the same because I am the man of night terrors and no sleep. Dennis Rodman. Charles Oakley. When Charles Oakley was traded to the Knicks, I hated Charles Oakley, and we traded away Bill Cartwright to get him. And then I loved Charles Oakley, and to me, he personifies everything that became those 1990s Knicks. Dennis Rodman on the Bulls, obviously a championship all-timer coming from and having that relationship Pistons. When you're in the front office and you're making a deal like that, the discussion on clubhouse fit is always either secondary or tertiary. The primary thing that you're going over is, does his play fit with our team? Is he going to be additive? What is the cost of acquisition? Does it make sense? And then you go to the next level, which is he a fit? Meaning, is there any issue we have, not just on the field or on the ice, but now let's talk off the field? It takes an unbelievable discussion and threshold to go to your players, your existing players, and talk about acquiring a player. You know that in my career, one time did I do that in all the trades that were made over 18 years, one time. And that's when we were looking at acquiring Mike Fiers, the player who had hit Giancarlo Stanton in the face when he got hit by a pitch in Milwaukee and blew up his face. I was not going to pull the trigger on a trade for him without speaking to Giancarlo. Not that Fires was an enemy of the team, but there was personal beef that is not based on when someone throws up and in, or even when there's a brawl that happens, or any sort of issue like that. It's got to rise to a totally different level to have me talk to a player. Went to speak to Giancarlo, and Giancarlo was very clear. He said, no, I do not want to be teammates with him. If there is anyone else you can acquire, please acquire anyone else. I want the pitching help. I'd like to win 81 games. I'd like to make the playoffs, but I'm not going to look at this guy every single day, hour after hour inside our clubhouse. Now, I didn't have to listen to that, but of course I did. So therefore, we did not acquire him. One of the things that is worth talking about that Stanton and I have actually discussed after that fact is the name Mike Fiers may be common to you, not because he hit Giancarlo. You may think of him as the whistleblower in the Houston Astros garbage can scandal. I assume that's what he's most famous for. The story that was broken by Evan Drellick and our guest on today's show, Ken Rosenthal, was Mike Fiers willing to talk about what was going on in Houston. Of course, if we had acquired him, as we like to talk about and laugh about, then he wouldn't have been a part of that, and there wouldn't have been him whistleblowing, and maybe the world would be different. Maybe. But in any case, so let's get back to Brad Marchand and going down the levels. Who do you think on the Panthers would have been spoken to by Paul Maurice or by Zito or even by Viola or Matt Caldwell, the owner and team president? Did his level of enemy rise to that level, or was it the fanemy? The fanemy is someone who your fan base can't stand. I'm sorry to tell you that has zero impact in our desire or whether or not we will acquire a player. It absolutely doesn't matter, and that may sound callous or may sound uncaring, but I'm just telling you, it doesn't matter. I don't believe in this case any of the players would have been spoken to in advance. I don't think that it rises to that level. But now, how do the fans in Sunrise, the fans of the Panthers, forget the team? How do you not look at Brad Marchand, who is the oldest player in Stanley Cup history at 37, to score a goal in the first 3 games of the Stanley Cup? He has been a spark plug for this team that's looking to become a dynasty. And the Oilers got totally rattled by that first goal, and it manifested itself in them going after penalties, which is not their game. It makes no sense. When you've got the offense that the Oilers have, why were they coached, or why were they allowed to become so, what's the word, Coca? Pippy? I don't think that's it. When you're peppy, that may be it. When they were going in, and after every whistle, they were going in with elbows and going in with cross checks. And some of the penalties Evander Kane had were just ridiculous. And it all built to, it became a blowout. And then in the third period, things came unglued. And that's when I started thinking about hockey and the fighting that goes on in hockey. And I was trying to understand what in any other sport exists that is so loved by the fans and so hated by a front office because there's no upside at all. Fighting in hockey. Where do you see that in any other sport? Can you imagine there's a sport where you can drop your gloves, square off, and get a 5-minute major, get a 10-minute game misconduct? And hockey has instituted penalties for fighting, but it's not like they don't allow it. You could do what the NBA does, go right to suspension if you leave the bench. And if you're on the court and you're fighting, you're going to be suspended for multiple games. A 10-minute misconduct with 5 minutes to go in a game is not exactly a major deterrent to the fighting. And what the front offices would say is, well, I do like the fact that it can get the crowd riled up, or I like that it can get our bench riled up, or it can put a pep in our step. And they're not really landing punches. They're mostly holding each other's jerseys, and the referees get in there when the two players are on the ice because they've slipped. But am I the only one who looks at those fights and says, wait a minute, if you connect on a helmet with a bare fist, aren't you in danger of hurting your hand much more so than hurting the other player? Aren't you in danger of going down in a pile on skates for a twisted knee, a torn ACL, or some other sort of injury where the juice is just not worth the squeeze, except it's become this thing where, and this goes back, I'm going to say a name, Coca, of a guy whom I guess is played before you were born, Nick Fateu. I think I'm saying the name right. When he was put on the ice, it was like Slapshot, an entire movie about it. He's coming on the ice to fight. A father of a current day player, a guy named Ty Domi, one of the great hockey fighters of all time. When they're brought on the ice, it's not for their skill, although Domi was quite talented. It really is just for starting and dropping gloves. We saw during the Four Nations Cup gloves drop on the puck drop. And it became the biggest story of what was that in-season tournament that seems like years ago, but it was super patriotic and super exciting when we saw countries fighting as it represented a little small sample of that which we live in a macro way, both economically, religiously, geographical. I have a proposal, and it's the anti-Coca proposal because it gets them upset. But my proposal is, I don't know why we would not have stiffer penalties for fighting. Game misconducts should be the following. If you get a game misconduct with under 10 minutes to go in a game, then you should not be allowed. And if you're not dressing the next game, that's fine. But the next game in a series should start on the power play. If there is an instigator, the person who starts it, and there's always the instigator, and you can easily figure out who that is, they do that when they dole out penalties. You've got to make it so there is a disincentive to have what happens at the end of the game last night, because while you may say it's exciting, and while ratings may tell you, God, people have to hang in there in a blowout, what better reason to hang in there than a fight? There's too much danger in the game that's inherent. So I would change the rule on the game misconduct. Coca's like, you should, listen in my ear. He's going, boo. Coca, I can hear you. It's not distracting. I can talk through anything. He wants me to tell the audience, I'm happy to. We can wait till our next Friday show. By the way, there's no Friday show this week. Coca's like, oh, I guess we didn't have a good show Friday. No, we had a great show Friday. Coca's the guest every Friday. It just so happens that this Friday there's no show. It's not about you, Coca, I promise. It's about Eagle River, Wisconsin. Fans like it. Players like it. David doesn't. What a great way to start a day. Coming up with a list of things that fans love, players love, and David doesn't. Not only am I doubling down on what I talked about regarding the Kansas City Royals and they're calling up their top prospect, I am quadrupling down with what the Boston Red Sox did yesterday. I will hear from all corners of the world that Roman Anthony becoming a member of the Boston Red Sox is a banner day for that storied franchise. Having the number one prospect in baseball, having him come up on June 9th for his first game on June 9th, where he goes 0 for 4, not a big deal. I'm not rooting for him to be bad. He's good. He's going to be a fixture in the outfield. There is a better than normal chance that he will achieve free agency, get 6 years of service. The whole point of why I tell you that players should not be brought up this week in June is because I'm telling you that about players who are good. The internet, God bless you all, you seem to think that I'm rooting against Roman Anthony, and it's the opposite. Let me explain again what the Red Sox did, and let me give you the rules in the CBA and why the Red Sox have misapplied those rules. In the last CBA, there was a lot of discussion about why aren't teams bringing up their young players sooner. service time manipulation, a concept that is verboten to be spoken about when you're executive and is a tried and true way for me to tell you as a host of Nothing Personal that I will never run a team again because I don't want to, because I'm going to talk to you about service manipulation. Service time manipulation is what all teams do, and if they don't, they should. The reason why you manipulate service time is service time defines what your cost of goods sold is going to be. And it is not that I'm making players into widgets or saying that they should not be respected. They're not human beings. But the reality is your payroll is your cost of doing business in sports, the business of sports. I believe that we should be calling it sports business, just like we call it show business. But for whatever reason, we call it just sports. When you call up a player, you have control of the salary of that player for 3 years. That's the rule. All you have to do is pay the player the minimum salary as stated in the collective bargaining agreement. It used to be 20 grand, 50 grand, 150 grand. It's now over 750 grand, but that is mandated in the CBA, and that's what you pay a player year 1, year 2, year 3. But there is something called a Super 2. A Super 2 is any player with more years than 2 of service time and fewer than 3 who's in the top 22% of total service days in his career. And the rule is that if you are one of those players who achieves Super 2 status, you get to be in arbitration 1 year early. And instead of 3 years of arbitration, which 78% of players have, you get 4 years of arbitration. Why does that matter? Because in arbitration, you're not making the minimum. You are making a number a whole lot bigger. The difference can be for Roman Anthony, his first year of arbitration, it can be, let's call it $6 million. That could be his salary. And if he were at the minimum, let's call it $1 million. That means that the Boston Red Sox are paying $5 extra million to Roman Anthony to play in the 2028 season. Let me explain the math. Roman Anthony called up this year. He will play in theory from June 9th through the rest of the year. He will be what's called a 0+. At the end of every year, a player is assigned what his service time is based on days in the big leagues. Let's say he plays all year in 2026 at the minimum. At the end of 2026, he'll be a 1+. Let's say he plays all year in 2027. So at the end of 27, he will have played 2 full seasons, 26 and 27, and the balance of 25, where we are now. If he achieves Super 2 status in 2028, which you may say, David, that is so far from now, I can't even picture it. And I'll tell you, as the president of a team, that's tomorrow. In 2028, Roman Anthony could make $6 million or $1 million. I'm not even done. In 2029, he builds off either $6 million, where he could go to $10 million, or that would be his first year of arbitration. Think about the significance of the difference, and it's all about 2 weeks. Now that it's June 9th, it's all about 1 week or 8 days. The reason why you wait until toward the end of June, call it late teens, early 20s, to call up your best player is that you get an extra year before the player is arbitration eligible. The CBA, the new collective bargaining agreement, wanted to get teams not to manipulate service time. So they came up with something called the Prospect Promotion Initiative. Put your best players on the team early. That's what fans want. That's what the players union wanted. And so baseball came up with this brilliant idea. If you have a player on your opening day roster and that player finishes first or second in Rookie of the Year, you get an extra draft pick. That's the prospect promotion initiative. And we know how much we love draft picks because in baseball, we're so good at drafting that anytime you get a pick, you are potentially getting a superstar. Do you think that teams in the real world are looking at their roster and saying, I'm going to put this guy on the opening day roster because I want the draft pick? No. You put a player on the opening day roster, whether it's Bobby Witt or Dontrell Willis, because that's what you think is best for your team for the entire season. But once you make the decision about opening day, there are then future dates that you think about. One of them is the middle of April, and the rule on that is very simple. When you call a player up in the middle of April, the math tells you that you are keeping control of that player for a full extra year. And then you look at the middle of June. The rule of that has to do with the Super 2 rule, which I just explained to you. The second thing that is in this current CBA is something called a bonus pool. A bonus pool is a pot of money that is paid to prospects who are on big league teams who have not yet achieved arbitration. If you achieve certain things, whether it's WAR or whether it's votes for Cy Young, MVP, Rookie of the Year, you are eligible to receive money above your minimum salary that the team pays you. But guess what? When a player gets money from the bonus pool, that doesn't come from the team. You get paid that from the league, which means you're only paying 1/30th of the money that is going to your player. And two, that money does not count for your luxury tax calculation. It is not part of your competitive tax payroll. So I am great and fine with players getting money in the bonus pool because players can get more money, let them make as much as they can. But the difference between a team paying a player and the league paying a player is significant. And when you are making decisions on when you call up your players, you have to think about these things. The fact that we're talking about the Red Sox and the Royals in the same conversation should be exciting to baseball because it's not a difference in the actions of a large payroll versus a small payroll team. The concern is that if more teams are acting with complete reckless disregard towards Super 2, it's going to become an issue that baseball is going to want to deal with through the next collective bargaining agreement. Because what Super 2 was supposed to do, it was supposed to reward players who were in the top 22% of service time of their class. But it was supposed to guide teams into paying attention to service time. And the more teams who do not pay attention, the more it will become an issue in bargaining. I am not yucking on Roman Anthony. I am simply explaining in as clear a way as possible that all decisions that you make today impact your ability to operate tomorrow. Boston Red Sox are an example of a team, they don't like going over the competitive tax threshold. They don't like paying luxury tax. Some years they do, some years they don't. We're going to talk about a team in another league and how they're dealing with luxury tax and aprons. And we talk about all of that in basketball. We talk about the salary cap in football. Baseball, there is no salary cap. Baseball, there are only teams who are supposed to be paying attention. And what's resulted is this disparity that exists that's got to be dealt with and will be dealt with. And it doesn't help when you've got two teams at two different ends of the scale who are actually acting the same. The other thing of note on Roman Anthony and him being called up and all of the pressure the Red Sox felt that he hit the 580-foot home run and he is the greatest player, top prospect. The Red Sox have underperformed. Granted, I jinxed them by choosing them to win the pennant. There are people who were talking yesterday that Roman Anthony was called up and put right in the lineup in right field. And remember, Roman Anthony he can play all the outfield positions, but he likely will be a left fielder going forward. The Red Sox played him in right field only a couple of games in AAA and then shoved him out there. I've mentioned this before. I want to make sure that we're clear about it. When we want a player to be on our team, 99% of the time, forget it, Coca, 100% of the time, when it's a position player, we are calling up a player because of his offense. We have not called up a player and said, hey, we know he's going to hit 205, but man, we could use some better defense up the middle. We may have a player on our team and we may not require huge offense from a position because we love his defense. We love his speed, whatever the case may be. But we're looking at help with a struggling season, when we're not scoring enough runs or we're not winning enough games, we're calling up a player because of what he will do at the dish. We then will fit that player into a position, whether he is a career shortstop, whether we project him as a left fielder, center fielder, right fielder, second baseman. The only position that we will not put a player in the big leagues without substantial minor league time, even if it's a straight catcher or a converted catcher like JT Realmuto, who we drafted as a shortstop and then converted him early in his career, like immediately to a catcher, and then let him catch throughout the minor leagues. When you call up a catcher catches. When you call up a left fielder, he may play right field. When you call up a shortstop, he may play second base. We are not focused on the position. We're focused on the power. We're focused on the average. We're focused on the holes in our lineup and what holes a player can slide into. I'm not a big fan of calling up your best prospect and then hitting him 8th and not playing him every day, or hitting him 7th and not playing him every day. If I'm calling up my best prospect and actually screwing up the entire Super 2 calculation, you better be a middle of the order producing player like Miguel Cabrera, who we still manipulated his service time because obviously, why wouldn't you? So I'm not concerned that Roman Anthony played in right field. I'm not concerned what position he's going to play going forward. As a matter of fact, Alex Cora's position was pretty simple. He said, listen, we're shorthanded. We're calling him up. We got to give him a shot. We're going to play him every day because we want and need his offensive contribution. En va voir, we will see. But please take from this that it is not as simple as the media or some fans make it out to be. When you are making a decision, those decisions have a ripple effect, and it impacts you way sooner than you think. All right, before we go to break, Coca, I want to remind everyone that tomorrow is Wednesday. I hope you associate Wednesday with So You Want to Talk to Samson. I hope you associate Wednesday with calling 631-DPS-4869. Leave a voicemail. We're going to listen to it, and you may make it onto the air. You can ask questions if you want on Twitter at David P. Samson or on Instagram at David P. Samson. But we want to hear your voice. It's more fun. So 631-377-4869. And tomorrow, hour 2, and every Wednesday, hour 2, will be all about you, the audience that is so loyal, who we love and respect so much. All right, after the break, we're going to review what I told you we'd review, called The Better Sister. And then we're going to talk a little bit of NBA, not finals related, but let's talk about Giannis after the break. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. It's David Samson coming at you live. We say every day from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. You wanted the second hour, you got it. We've been doing it since last Monday, June 2nd. We love it, and we love the response we're getting. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your time, the loyalty that we have built with you over the years since we started this in October of 19. It is humbling, and as busy as we are, still, I'm watching a movie or some sort of content every day. having 21 or 22 hours in a day helps. I watch The Better Sister because I will watch anything with Elizabeth Banks and anything with Jessica Biel. I didn't say, oh, let's do that again, Coca. Thank you. Here we go. 4869. Now it's time for the review. I'm sorry, Coca. I'm going to get it. It's only day 7 of this. Giannis. Wait, what? Did we do the review or not? Did I talk about The Better Sister? I don't even think I did. Jessica Biel and Elizabeth Banks. So here's the story. It comes from a book I did not read. Because why read when you can watch a multi-episode show that has Jessica Biel and Elizabeth Banks? And here's the deal. There's a murder. There's a trial. There's the question of who would have killed the guy from Billions? Was it the wife? Was it the ex-wife? Was it the son? Was it Matthew Modine, who, by the way, has become a guy, an actor who I fell in love with back in the days of Birdie, and now has become this character actor extraordinaire. If you want to see something, Coca, totally off subject, go watch And the Band Played On, one of the great movies ever about the AIDS epidemic. That's just what I think of with Matthew. But he's also in this. Could he have committed the murder? And you go through about 8 episodes wondering to yourself, wait, I'm not sure who did it. And then you find out who did it, but it's not the reveal at the end of the series. You find out like 2 episodes to go who did it. And then how do you deal with the cover-up, or how do you deal with dealing with who did it when everyone wanted to do it? Everyone had motive, opportunity, and everyone had, it's really something. It must have been a great book. My issue with the series, it was about 4 episodes too long. So while I don't want you ever to skip content, I think in this case, I'm going to say the book is probably the better way to go, because the series to me was only okay. It rated very highly, but I think people will say they like the book better. If you are looking to know what I'm reviewing tomorrow, I am going to watch today, no matter through hell or high water. I'm watching Sinners because it's available to stream. So Sinners will be watched and then reviewed tomorrow on Nothing Personal. Told you I wanted to talk about Giannis, and I do. Rare and not necessarily appropriate during the NBA Finals to talk about offseason, and I'm guilty, and I'm going to be guilty twice in this show. I always like the focus to be on the field, on the court. Don't bother me with anything free agent related, trade related, collective bargaining related. I want everyone to love the fact that OKC and Indiana are in a great series, best of 5. But there was a story that came out via Bleacher Report, and it was about a growing skepticism that Giannis will actually be traded. And I want to explain why this is so important. When you've got multiple teams who all are in the same position during an offseason, where they have a plan A, because we all do. We make a plan A, and then a B, and then a C, and then a D. Some teams go past 4 plans. There were years when we did go past 4 plans, but 4 plans is about right as you're doing your roster construction, as you're thinking about which free agents you're going to go after, who you're trying to acquire via trade. There are multiple teams whose plan A is Giannis. There are multiple teams who do not want to consider any possible plan B or C or D until Giannis makes a decision. And the weird part is, it's not Giannis's decision to make. What is being reported is that Giannis could demand a trade, and therefore it will be a feeding frenzy of teams whose plan A is to acquire Giannis. May I remind you, demanding a trade does not mean the team has to trade the player. You don't have to act like the Miami Heat with Jimmy Butler, or the Miami Marlins with Christian Yelich, or the Portland Trailblazers with Damon Lillard. There's a laundry list of players. And whenever I do that, by the way, a little verbal tick, that means I can't think of any others at the moment. And that's my cue to Coca and Jack to feed me names of players who used empowerment to get traded in various sports or hold out. They're NFL players who hold out, trade me, or I'm not going to play even though I've got a year left on my deal. Giannis signed in Milwaukee. And every year you've got to prove to Giannis that we are a title contending team, which they're not. We are going to make sure that we surround you with the talent. Well, Lillard's out and hurt, so the Bucks have to pay him. They're not going to contend because injuries happen. Just think about what's the other player, Coca, who just tore their Achilles and is out for the year next year. And there was another player, Jason Tatum. Thank you, Coca. God, I love it when you're right in my brain. The Celtics still, are they trying to win a title? Can they win a title paying what they're paying to Jason Tatum? Or is it going to cause them to trade Jaylen Brown and not re-sign Al, whatever the case may be? But everyone's waiting for Giannis, and now an article comes out that says, it may not be that Giannis demands a trade. And if that's the case, that he may, and this is what the article actually is trying to tell you, the decision to stay or go ultimately falls to Giannis. And then it says who loves Milwaukee, who doesn't love Milwaukee, and his family's happy there. Who's not happy in Milwaukee? That he cherishes the idea of being a one-team player for his entire career. Give me a break. It is a complete mistake for anyone to either write or believe that the decision to stay or go ultimately falls to the player. Here's what Milwaukee should be doing. They should be meeting with Giannis, and they should be saying, hey, Giannis, I don't know whether you're going to demand a trade because I've read, and I know you're having a fun off season, and I know you don't often answer your phone during the off season because, believe you me, finding players in the off season way harder than you think. Sometimes you have to go through agents. Sometimes you go through their best friend on the team. Sometimes you try to call their family. Sometimes you text and call the player and they just don't respond. So we'll send a trainer to go see them at their home, hoping to find them, stalking them. But the Bucks need to call Giannis. They need to say, listen, are you going to demand a trade? Because here's how it's going to go. If you don't tell us that you're demanding a trade in the next 24 to 48 hours, so we can then decide very quickly after the finals are over whether or not we are going to grant you that wish and whether or not there is a trade that we would even consider, we are not going to have an entire offseason, not only where we are held in basically purgatory, but where other teams in the league are as well. Strategically, you may say to yourself, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, this is brilliant. Let's pretend that we're trading Giannis while we decide what we're going to do with free agents and trades, and let all the other teams stick with their plan A, pretending that plan A is still possible when we know plan A is never going to happen. And that gives us the field to open up to whatever plan we may want to execute. That's a game of chess that teams aren't going to play. And the Bucks would be very well served to tell Giannis, hey, listen, you have a 3-year extension you signed in 2023. It hasn't even kicked in. He's going to get $112 million over the next 2 years. He's got a player option at $62 million. Do you know how far $112 million goes in Milwaukee? And that is not yucking on Milwaukee. I'm just telling you, you want the house from Major League where Corbin Burnson lived on Lake Drive? No problem. You want a mansion in River Hills? You're in. You want to buy 3 mansions side by side? Bang it. You can do it. You want to do an apartment downtown near the Fiserv Forum where you can stay just because you want to? Plus you want to buy a private island and a couple other things? You got it. How does this end? This ends with Giannis in Milwaukee. Giannis could end up being Robin Yount. That's exciting. Go down in history. Better than Robin Yount because he won a title in Milwaukee. Go down in history as a one-team player. because that happens so infrequently that it would make him an exception? Better than Karl Malone and John Stockton? Well, for myriad reasons, better than both. But in terms of one team, no titles versus one, I don't know, Coca. I think that Giannis sees what's going on out there, sees his future in Milwaukee, wants to think about winning the second title, may or may not demand a trade, but I don't think Milwaukee trades him. Karl Malone did play for the Lakers. Why did I think he was only on the Jazz his whole career? Must have been late. Ring chasing. He was a ring chaser. I'm a ring chaser too. All right, let's talk about another player who's going to be a free agent. Well, wait a minute. That's not accurate. Giannis is not going to be a free agent. Myles Turner is. We had a Shams exclusive yesterday. Coca got upset. He doesn't understand why we can't just watch the finals and why Shams couldn't have sat on that potsy for another couple of days or another week and a half. Here was the Shams exclusive. Do they call it a Shams bomb now, or did that retire with Woj, Coca? Wasn't it a Woj bomb and a Shams? What's it? A Shams Elysee? That's what we'll call it. The Shams Elysee yesterday is that Myles Turner is going to be re-signed by the Indiana Pacers, and that his market is likely about $30 million a year, which is insane. Now, don't get me wrong. He's got a nice three-point shot. He's got a nice mid-range shot. He can play some defense. He's a big guy. I'm in. Myles Turner has been with the Pacers his whole career, except when he chased rings with the Lakers. But he's been in Pacers whole career, finally in the finals, trying to get a ring. I'm in for all of it. $30 million worth? Not so sure. But here's the crazy part. By Shams doing the Elysee, what he's saying is that the Pacers, for the first time, are not just committing to their core. They are prepared to re-sign him, and by doing that, they will be in luxury tax territory for the first time in 2 decades. Think about what just got leaked. That you've got a team who's negotiating with a player who is going to try to maximize his worth in free agency. And what that player is now reading, if not leaking, is that he is going to be offered a deal, which is an incredible deal, and that the Pacers, to do it, are not worried about luxury tax, which, by the way, is one of the things you use in a negotiation with agents in a salary cap world. You say, sorry, we can't give you your wish. We can't go to that level. Why? Because we'll be over the cap. We'll be over the first apron, the second apron. We'll be in territory where it could cost us $1.50 for every dollar that we go over, which would make signing Myles at $30 million really giving him $40 million in terms of cash out the door. I am very interested in what the Pacers do with this Shams Elysee, because when you are running a team and you're in the finals or in the World Series, and I had this with Pudge, who was a free agent during the World Series, and there was tons of talk. Will the Marlins re-sign Pudge? We didn't, because Detroit paid for him. Or will he go to another team? And I spoke to Pudge about this during our playoff run during that October, and I told him that we are not going to talk to him about this until our playoff run is over. And my preference would be for him to just not think about it. And what I said was, you get yourself a ring, you're putting yourself in a position to get paid, whether it's by us or by someone else. What I didn't say is that he'd be in the same position whether he wins a ring or not, whether we're in the World Series or beat the Cubs and make it to the World Series and win the pennant. The fact is, when you're signing a free agent like a Pudge, you're doing it for pedigree, you're doing it for position. Myles Turner, as a ring-bearing center, is not worth $35 million versus $30 million if he loses to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the front office, they're focused on the finals right now. But I'll tell you, even during our run to the ring in 2003, we would have conversations, whether we're on the plane to New York, whether we're sitting around before the game when we get to the ballpark 5 or 6 hours before first pitch. Of course, we're always talking about what the '04 season is going to look like, which was the next year, which players we're going to keep, how are we going to fit Derek Lee, how are we not going to fit him. The front office is always looking at 1, 3, and 5 year rosters, always thinking about moves that are going to be made. The Pacers, by telling you through Shams, whoever did this, that they want to keep their core together, they have the core already signed, whether it's Siakam or Halliburton or Obi Toppin, Nemhard, McConnell. They're all under contract, and they're all under contract for 3 more years. So that core is together. You can't keep everybody. Myles Turner, if that's the contract that's going to bring you over the luxury tax threshold, for my mind, I'm not disclosing that, and I'm not going over that threshold for Myles Turner. I may go over that for somebody, but probably not to keep the same team together, because win the title or not, you've got to tweak your team. You've got to have flexibility. And this leak would indicate that the Pacers are willing to forego flexibility in an effort to show that this core can win multiple titles. Well, they're 3 wins away right now in a best of 5 from trying to win a title. Hey, both the Stanley Cup and the NBA Finals are both best of 5. We'll wait to see what happens. Nothing personal pick of the day. Oilers plus 120 didn't seem to be enough, did it? Back to 500, super excited, telling myself we've got this. Nope. How about the Padres over the Dodgers? How'd you feel about that in extra innings? Good? Fine? No problem? We lost that pick too. It's a big series, by the way, the Dodgers-Padres series. And the Dodgers come and win. Now, what it did is it moved the Padres into 3rd place. The Giants passed them. The Giants are HOTTT. But it was a big win for the Dodgers. So we are 76 and 78. What do we got tonight? Oh, you can bet your sweet bippy we're watching Roman Anthony as the Rays try to make it 2 in a row in the RAE, the Roman Anthony era, which has begun. Now, I'm not saying that Lucas Giolito is bad. I'm not sure I understand why it's only minus 114 Rays favored over the Red Sox, because Lucas is really bad and the Red Sox are really struggling. As a matter of fact, the Rays, as we may get to later, are hot. And I mean one of the hottest teams in baseball, if not the hottest, over the last 30 games. They're like 20 and 10, Coca. They're in a playoff position from Steinbrenner Field. Lucas Giolito is he in the first year of his $38 million 2-year deal? Did he really get $19 million a year from the Boston Red Sox? And you're telling me, oh, he missed all of last year. I can't even remember that. Doesn't last season feel, did you remember that or look that up? That Lucas had the injury? You did remember it? So let me get it straight. They're paying him $38 million for this year's work. 1 year of work, 38. That's really a hell of a deal. That's like Scherzer and Verlander with the Mets, except I think they had a 4 handle. God, baseball is impossible. The injuries, the issues, the ability for teams to pay. And you think that I'm crazy by telling you that the Red Sox should be paying attention to service time? Because how else, if you don't pay attention, can you waste money on signings like Giolito at $38 million? I wonder if when they called up Roman Anthony, and forget the laundry cart and all of the intrigue and all of the excitement surrounding that, I wonder if at some point they looked around the clubhouse and they went down, and it was Sam Kennedy and Craig Breslow, and they looked at Alex Cora and said, hey, we're bringing in help, buddy. I promise you're so secure in your job. We're bringing in help for you. And his name is Roman Anthony. You've got this. By the way, you've got to start Lucas Giolito tomorrow. Sorry. It's just business. Oh, no, this is not the end of the show, Coca. After the break, we're coming back with Ken Rosenthal, who's going to be here. We have a whole nother hour. Sorry about that. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. It is a Tuesday, June 10th. That means hour two. We've got a guest, and I've been looking forward to this since we started Nothing Personal, because if you have a chance to speak to the senior writer for The Athletic, that's number one. Number two, MLB on Fox field reporter. Number three, insider for Foul Territory TV. Check that out as well. I'm talking about Ken Rosenthal, someone I've known since my first day in baseball, which I don't know if Ken will remember, back when I was with the Expos. Ken Rosenthal, welcome to Nothing Personal.
David, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
It is good to have you. I know it's a busy time of year. The trade deadline is about a month and a half away. There's so much I want to cover, so much going on in baseball, trying to get the NBA Finals done and the Stanley Cup done so the focus can solely be on our sport. I wanted to just start with the trade deadline because you obviously, please make sure you're reading Ken's columns that come out every day, seemingly. It really is every day, both with notes and deep dives. I just talked about you, Ken. In the first hour, we were talking about Mike Fiers.
Okay.
Your guy. And what would have happened if Giancarlo Stanton had allowed us to trade for Mike Fiers? I listed it as the only example in my career where I went to a player before making a trade, and Giancarlo said, do not trade for him. I will not have him in my clubhouse. I just won't do it. And we granted him that wish. And I believe after he ended up being in Houston, which made him a whistleblower, which you were a part of with Evan Drellick.
Okay. First of all, the Stanton thing, that was before the Houston story?
Yes, he got hit in Milwaukee before we signed him to that $325 million deal when he had not faced live pitching since he got hit in the face.
I see. All right. With Fiers, that story would have run anyway, without him, I should say. And the reason for that is we had it. Now, when we had him on the record, then it became a much more effective story. As with all stories, if you have people on the record, and David, you know this because you were off the record all those years as Marlins president, but when people are on the record putting their name to something, it makes something that much stronger. So I believe I would say 95% certain that story would have run without Fiers. It just became that much better once we had him confirming what we were about to report, which was the Astros were using an advanced system, an illegal system, to steal signs electronically.
Were you going after players to go on the record? And was there a deadline that was set by you in your mind? And then did he come in like right under the deadline? How did that work?
I wouldn't say there was a deadline for it, but was I calling players and trying to find one to go on the record? The answer to that is yes.
And you, was he the last one? So we weren't even going to talk about this. I'm sorry, but it just came up. Once you get a player on the record, do you stop? Do you try to get a second, or do you say, hey, I can't believe we got one, we're ready to go now?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and this is 6 years ago now, Fiers was about at the end of the list. We had exhausted the list, and I had struck out. Evan had struck out. We had not gotten anybody to go on the record. And I don't know how many players were left on our list, but once we had him, in this case, that was enough because we had all of the other information and we had it confirmed by multiple sources. We just didn't have anyone on the record. So it wasn't like we needed a second person on the record. If we had had one, great. But if I recall correctly, we had pretty much exhausted the list.
I'd have to believe in your career that's got to be, is that not the number one story that you've been a part of?
I would say yes. And the funny story behind that, David, is that at the time, my co-writer and really the guy who drove the story, Evan Drellick, my name is on it with his, and that's proper, that's fine. But Evan knew about this for a year before he came to the Athletic, just could not nail it down. And then once we got together, we combined to nail it down. But the day it came out, we were at the GM meetings, and it was in Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, I should say. And Evan turned to me, and he said, this will be the biggest story I ever break. And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? There'll be a bigger story to come along next week. We'll get another one. And I, in my head, because we had worked so hard to get it to the finish line, did not realize the magnitude of it. Odd as that sounds, there had been other hints of this scheme that the Astros were doing, nothing like along the lines of what we had had, but there were pieces of it kind of coming out. And I saw our story as the culmination, the one story that put the pieces together. But what I failed to realize was it really had this monumental impact on the sport because it led to rules changes and it led to hopefully a different culture. It definitely did. And at the time, in the moment, I did not realize it.
So I'm surprised. I want to move on to this trade deadline that's coming up, but I just want to put a bow on that. That the impact of that story is it's felt today inside Major League Baseball. It's felt today inside clubhouses. There's still players around who are a part of it. There's still a question of the impact it will have as Hall of Fame votes start happening with certain players. And so you're still in the fourth inning of this story. So think about when Altuve, by the way, comes for a
Yes.
vote. You're going to be called on to talk about this and what impact it will have because seemingly he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but for the possibility that of buzzers and garbage cans.
Well, I will tell you one story about the buzzers since you bring it up. And I've brought this up on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it before. But people say Ken knew after he hit that home run to ask the question, why did they grab your shirt? Why did they tear it off your body? Ken knew something was up. I had no idea something was up. I had a producer in my ear say, hey, ask him about the jersey coming off. Because in the truth of the matter, once he hit the home run, the one off Chapman, I did not look to see him cross home plate. I'm racing to get on the field. I'm trying in my head to prepare what I'm going to ask. I'm not watching. So I had no idea what was up. If not for the producer, I would not have asked the question.
I can't believe that it was Chapman, and I'm thinking back because Chapman is a conversation for now. Transition alert, Coca. Chapman, is that a player you expect could be on the move?
No, I expect the Red Sox to get back in this thing. And I know they haven't played well. Another tough loss last night, but they've invested a lot in this season. This was to be the season they turned it around. And barring continued poor play, which is possible, I do not expect him to be on the move.
But when you look at how they're operated and who's operating, Craig Breslow in theory with Sam Kennedy and et cetera, he'd be the exact player who you would move.
Oh, no
And
question.
because you can get assets for him, he's not going to be on the roster next year, and he's having one of those seasons again out of nowhere at an advanced age.
That's true, David. But their window, if you want to call it that, is supposedly reopening. That was the promise of this season. Hey, we're going to start to mix in our young kids. We signed Alex Bregman. We traded for Garrett Crochet. They're not going to give up on this season easily, nor should they. Let's face it, Bregman might only be there this 1 year. And I know he's not there right now. He's injured, but the whole psychology of the club is go for it this year. Now, they're going to be realistic, of course. If they're out of it, and it's difficult to be out of it with the expanded postseason, then they'll make some other decisions. But again, I don't expect them to be in that position. I expect them to somehow right the ship here and play better.
I think that's what separates good front offices from bad ones, though, is recognizing that even in an expanded wild card, if you're dialing for a dream, you have to maximize assets, even if you're the Red Sox, who have shown to be conscious about what their payroll is and butting up against luxury tax threshold. If you can turn Chapman into a bit more and filling your pipeline again, I don't know. I think you have to do that for a bullpen arm. It's like your dream. When we would sign a bullpen arm to a 1 year deal like this, it's your dream that you can move him for something that it actually works out, assuming your dream of winning that year doesn't happen.
David, that's in a vacuum. I agree with you. But without being disrespectful here, it's one thing when you're the Miami Marlins and you're not facing fan and media pressure to the extent you are in Boston. They're under fan and media pressure. And I just don't know that they can give up on this season easily based on their disappointments the past several years, based on their investment in this club. Every circumstance is different. Every season is different for every team. And that's why it seems to me it's going to be tough to wrest Aroldis Chapman away from them.
So where are you going to add if you're the Red Sox? Because they brought up
First
Anthony,
base,
they played him in right field. What are you going to add?
first base for sure. And I would also look to add to the rotation, which has been a huge disappointment. Giolito has not pitched well. Bueller has not pitched well. Bio was good last night, but they need help in the rotation and always a bullpen arm too.
So do you think that they would take a chance? Do you think anyone will take a chance on Sandy? The Marlins back from Tommy John, Alcantara, Cy Young Award winner, pitching. Is he qualified yet, Coca? For the earn? Remember, there was a time when he would have had the worst ERA by like 3 runs, but he was 1 inning away from qualifying. Is that the type of arm? What do you do if you're the Marlins? Because I want to tell you what the front office is thinking. I want to hear your view.
It's June 10th. It's not July 31st. And I still expect Sandy to come around. That last start, he had a little bit of a different mix, more success. He pitches again tonight. I'm actually eager to see what he does tonight because he still is the belle of the ball as long as he is on an upward trend. He's not been on an upward trend this year. It's understandable to some degree. He's coming off surgery, but it's not too late for him to restore some value. Remember, we've seen circumstances over the last few years. I can't remember one, but circumstances where a guy has a few good starts and boom, he gets traded. So I can see that happening again.
How can you not be on an upward trend when your ERA is 8.5? Isn't it
Fair
almost
point. Well, you can
definitional?
stay on the same trend. You can have an ERA of eight and a
It's
half in a month.
impossible. And for him to be as bad as he was would seem improbable, though it is tough first year back from Tommy John. Strange that people just expect, like last night, a Marlins pitcher again. Your
Yes.
Perez comes back, and it's hard. You pitch 3 innings, and you're not going to be as effective. But if you're the Marlins, you've got to get this right because they're running out of assets. As a matter of fact, maybe they've run out of assets in order to try to hit it big. And if you're an acquiring team, I don't think you're going to give up for Sandy what you would have when you say he's the belle of the ball. I think there's a little tarnish on him now.
Oh, there's no question there is right now. And again, if this deadline was tomorrow, we're talking about a situation where they probably can't trade him just yet. They probably want to wait till the offseason and hope that things get better. But that in a shrinking window here is what they want to happen before July 31st. And if you can't make the absolute A1 trade for him, maybe you settle for less. And that is just the way it's going to be. But again, like so much with the deadline, this is all going to evolve. We're going to have sellers in 6 weeks that we don't have now. We're going to have teams willing to buy and sell that we are not necessarily aware of now. So I know people like to get talking about the deadline early, and we're talking just in a general sense, David, but people start throwing names around this time of year. It's still too early, in my opinion. And I've done this a long time now. I've done it long enough to know that things will change and they will change quickly and they will change right up until July 31st.
I'm sorry, but I thought on your site, which of course I'm a subscriber, as everyone should be to The Athletic, I'm almost positive that in April there were already articles about who to watch for at the deadline.
Not
So
by others.
I didn't say by you. I'm
Yeah.
just saying it's not that early. One of the teams, I guess, were you talking about the
So it is
Cardinals?
that early for reality. For fantasy, it's always a good time.
Were you thinking about the Cardinals when you were thinking about a team that if the deadline were today, they could be buyers, and by July 31st, they may have regressed to what people thought they would be?
They're a really interesting team right now, and there are so many dynamics going on with them. It's like I was saying before, David, there are different circumstances for every team, and you know this. So John Mozeliak, their president of baseball operations, is in his last year. He won't admit this. Of course, he's not going to admit this publicly. I think he wants to win. Who wouldn't want to win? Who wouldn't want to go out in the best possible way? That's one thing. The other thing is the surprise that they have become this season. And it's really interesting that they're getting 90th percentile outcomes on a lot of what they wanted, which is great and good for them. They did nothing in the offseason. And in some ways, it's kind of a bad example. It's a team that did nothing and is still having success. Maybe other teams will think the same way. But in their case, they had a lot of players that they wanted to look at. And that's what they've done. And those players, for the most part, not all of them, have succeeded. So at the deadline, they're a buyer if they continue this trend, yes. But how extensive a buyer are they? I don't know that it's that extensive. It seems to me that what they'll do is piecemeal ads, guys that should help them, but not monster type trades because Chaim Bloom, their next president of baseball operations, is part of the front office right now. And I can't imagine he wants to invest too many assets in going for it this season when he's going to be trying to build something that is sustainable for several years.
So a little scoop here is I was at a college graduation for my son, and Bill DeWitt was sitting right behind me because it was his granddaughter who was graduating as well. And we were talking. We hadn't seen each other in a bit. And he said to me, and I told him, well, that seems like something I could repeat on my show. And he smiled. He said, can't you be nicer to the Cardinals? I said, I'm so nice to them. I love St. Louis. And I felt like you. I felt like me talking to you for 18 years. Can't you be nicer to the Marlins? It made me actually feel like, wow, maybe we're doing something here. But he said, who knew? We're winning this year. And the look in his eye was that this is a total surprise season for him. And he's an octogenarian. It's not like he's interested in what's happening in 5 years. He was super excited at the possibility. So I think that you add those things up, and I think they're going to hang on and want to buy because to him, he was surrounded with family who were all so excited because they were thinking they were going to lose 90, and now they're thinking they could win 90, and for them, they're doing it.
And David, you know this too. The chance to win, the opportunity is rare. Just because you're good this year doesn't mean you'll be good next year. And when that opportunity arises, and I often have problems with teams where they don't grab the opportunity. When that opportunity arises, you had better go for it. You had better try because who knows what happens next year. Your best pitcher might get hurt. All kinds of things might happen. And Bill DeWitt has been in baseball long enough to recognize that, yes, that's the reality of the situation.
You talk about that and going for it. Obviously, during the offseason, there was talk of trading Nolan Arenado, and it didn't end up happening. But I think who you could be talking about is one of our favorite teams together, the Baltimore Orioles, who the first time I ever met you was way before I got into baseball in as it related to the Orioles and selling to Angelos, which seems like 100 years ago. Bill DeWitt was in that room, by the way. That's funny how the world works. Are the Orioles an example where you're disappointed, not just out of your love for them, but reality that they missed an opportunity and now it looks as though this window of getting overperformance by young players to their contract is over now?
Well, a couple things here. The time you're talking about when we were together in a courtroom was the auction to sell the Orioles in bankruptcy court. And for those who might not be aware of this, since it happened, I don't know, 32 years ago,
That's
it was
unreal.
your stepfather, Jeffrey Loria, on one side. And at the start of that day, Bill DeWitt, Larry Lucchino, and Peter Angelos were all aligned. And actually, they bought the team together. They won the bidding, and then DeWitt and Lucchino gradually broke off, and it became Angelos's team. So that was quite a day. But to ask or to answer your question, first of all, I have no particular love for the Baltimore Orioles or any other team. I
I didn't
did
mean to say you were not neutral. Sorry.
No, I did work in Baltimore for many years, so I have a good working knowledge of that team. But they are a team that has been immensely disappointing, immensely. And they're unquestionably going to be a seller, in my opinion. I think that one we can declare now. They have played a little bit better in the last 10 days or so. And I know that they don't want to make a decision just yet. I get it. They want to see where their playoff odds are on July 25th. But it's going to be really difficult for them unless they start just tearing it up. And they might. They've got more players coming off the injured list soon, O'Neill and Westberg and Sanchez. But I see them as a seller. And they're going to be, if they are a seller, probably an extensive seller. They have a number of interesting players. Zach Eflin, Tomoyuki Sugano, Bautista, the relief pitcher, Felix Bautista. They have some others as well. So yeah, I think they're going to sell. I think they could be the team that actually controls the deadline to some extent, if any team can. And it's hugely disappointing because the next question is, okay, you've sold, you've collected maybe more prospects. What next? Because the clock is ticking on Gunnar and on Adley Rushman and your other young players. And at some point, you got to get better again before it all has to fade away.
And don't forget, you've got a new owner there. And
Yes.
so they may be a serious candidate to be buyers and sellers. I was thinking about what you do as a new owner is you don't want to indicate to your fans like, all right, this window closed, welcome to baseball. So you could be smart and they've got the front office with maybe the chance to do that, that they could be a team that you should look for to do both. I was
That's
thinking
a
about
great
that for
point.
them.
That is a great point because I agree with you. New owner changes the dynamic, and also they can't simply concede. They can't go back to where they were. Not that they are going back to where they were a few years back, but they need to keep pushing forward. So maybe they're the type of team that trades, I don't know, Zach Eflin for a young pitcher or a younger position player who is major league ready or in the majors already. Maybe it's someone they identify as undervalued at the time who they can build up. Who knows? But yes, they need to add as well as subtract.
I want to end. Thank you so much for your time, by the way. I want to talk about the CBA. We're going to be talking a lot about this over the next, it's already started, which is always frustrating for us as executives that it's written about a year in advance. But
Well, it's the executives driving the conversation here.
well, by the way, can you imagine if Bud Selig, side note, Coca, sorry, if Bud Selig were commissioner and he had owners, we were told we would forget letters. He would call us and say, "You may not, if you open your mouth, you're finished." And he'd swear while drinking Diet Cokes. But the number of owners who are talking publicly right now, I had not seen that before in my career.
It's funny you mention that because I mentioned to one of my colleagues at The Athletic that the drum beats for the next stoppage started earlier this time than they have in my memory. And I've been doing this since 87 when there was a work stoppage every 3 or 4 years. I don't know why it's like this, but it seems like the owner's thirst for a salary cap has never been greater. And maybe I'm a victim of recency bias here because that thirst has always been there. But it seems like now there is a percentage of owners that are willing to shut down the sport to get what they want. To me, it's ill-conceived in the mildest possible term I could use, ill-conceived. I could use a lot of other terms. $12 billion industry, why would you want to shut it down? You're not the NFL. You're not coming back so quickly in the eyes of the public. But all that said, to answer your question, yes, it has started earlier. I am concerned about where this is going because again, there is a segment of owners who want this badly and want it maybe badly enough to shut down the sport.
All you need is eight. I remind the audience, all you need is a block of eight. And are you willing to say, because I've been out in front of this, I'm guaranteeing a lockout at the end of 26. Whether or not there's missed games, I'm going to hold off on that. But are you as certain as I am about that?
Oh, pretty much, yes. And I'm certain about it because the commissioner has already said in an article by Evan Drellick that a lockout can be a very useful thing.
He did
If
that
that's
for the
your
last
belief,
CBA.
if that's your belief, we're having a lockout.
The question is, will there be enough owners to allow for missed games? And what we had when I was around, we wanted obviously a way to help the economic disparity and the payroll disparity, but we never had eight. And so it was never a real discussion that concerned Commissioner Selig or Rob, for that matter, when he was running labor, because we could never put the group together. And you could come up with eight teams pretty easily right now. And so what will be interesting to me is if it happens, but we're going to find out.
We are going to find out. And one dynamic here that maybe is worth mentioning is if you have a salary cap, you're also going to have a salary floor. And there might be some lower revenue teams, small market teams that don't want a salary floor. That adds to the complexity of this for Manfred in trying to build a proper block of votes to get this thing done, if that is what he wants.
We were always fine with the floor as long as it was funded.
Of course.
Ken, thank you for your time today. Went over. I didn't mean to keep you for 3 minutes longer than I told you, but thank you for doing this. And I hope we can do it again as the season unravels.
My pleasure, David. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day, Ken.
You too.
I want to talk about private equity. It's something that teams are doing. And what interests me about it is that we've covered it. The possibility, let me explain what private equity is and why this is a story that I want to talk about. When you are trying to raise money to do a transaction, you can go to banks and borrow money. You can go to people and get them to invest in your company and use that money to do something. Or you can go to a fund. A fund is a bunch of money that invests in different things throughout different industries. And they don't take control of your company. They simply give you working capital or give you the opportunity to function or do projects that you're trying to do. We told you the private equity was coming to college, and we had to wait to see on this, I'm sure, Coca. And it was announced yesterday that private equity has come to college. This is a big story, and I want to make sure that we're not sleeping here. When it's announced that Penn State and UCLA are the first two clients of what is a $500 million college private capital fund, when you've got two universities like PSU and UCLA who are saying that we need to take in partners because we need extra money because our athletic department is a losing proposition. It is a business that, were it to be a business, would be shut down. We are moments away from getting rid of non-Olympic sports. All of the reasons we've talked about with the House settlement and all the other things around college athletics and players getting paid, including by schools now. You've got to go raise money. And what universities have done historically, because they didn't need that much, because players weren't making that much, is they would go to alums. Hey, you used to play for our team. Give me $100. Hey, it's a write-off. We're a 501c3. How about $100,000 over 5 years, $20,000 a year? Hey, you really want to meet the players? No problem. We're going to ratchet it up like a sponsor. We'll ratchet it up. Can you give $1 million? We'll even let you come on a trip one time and stand on the sideline. All sorts of things that have been going on for generations. But now the numbers are completely different. The deficits within the departments of these universities are at levels not seen before because the expenses have gone up without concomitant increases in revenue. And that is a prescription for financial ruin. So what these private equity funds have decided to do, and it's very smart, they say, hey, we're underweighted in sports business. We're overweighted in biotech. We're overweighted in all sorts of different industries and alternative investments and various other categories. But man, these sports teams, they seem to be worth money. How can we get into that? So the NFL made a list of different funds and private equity firms that can invest in NFL teams. And you've seen it happen. Dolphins, not the only. Foreign and private equity investment into NBA teams. Makes sense. How do you keep purchase prices going up? You've got to expand the number of people who can afford to buy a team for billions of dollars. And those people need to raise even more money than the billions they have. So you go out and you find private equity money. Normal. But now we're talking about universities. What exactly is the Penn State athletic program worth? How do you evaluate that? You can look at their EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. You can look at their operating income. You can look at their revenue, whatever you want to do. You can apply a multiple to their revenue or EBITDA and say, oh, you're making $5 million a year. Let's do 7 times that. You're worth $35 million. I'm just making up numbers. Do you know what happens when you multiply any number by a minus number that's not a minus number? You end up with a minus number. Hard to do a multiple of a team that loses money without assigning some sort of ego premium, without assigning some sort of premium to the lack of optionality in a space. Only 30 Major League Baseball teams, only 32 NFL teams. There is a lack of, or 30. I always confuse 32, 30. I think it's 30. There's 32 NBA teams, or maybe that's 30. Unbelievable that I lose a train of thought because I can't remember who's got 30 and who's got 32. Cut this. 4, 8, 6, 9. College, there are over 130 Division I universities. These universities have to find a way to balance their budget, and you can't do it through individual donations anymore. So what you do is you put financials together, you put projections together, and you go out and try to attract private equity. The thing about private equity is, unlike a person who's a jock sniffer who wants memorabilia and the chance to meet players and to go to a party and say, hey, by the way, you want to come to the sidelines of the next Hurricanes game, even though my company is totally made of paper tigers? You can't do that at private equity. You actually have to have a return on your investment. ROI, it's called. You have to have some sort of way to make money, not just annually, but the value of the asset has to increase as well. But what's the asset here? An athletic department? Does this mean the fact that there is now money going into these programs? Does this mean that not only is college sports history being made, but does this mean there's going to be breakups of companies like Warner Brothers style? Does this mean that universities are going to spin off like a SpinCo with NBC and Comcast? There's going to be a SpinCo that's going to be just the sports department, the athletic department of a university? That's what's coming. Because the only way to continue to attract investment like this is you have to have the ability to show that it makes sense and dollars. Currently, these athletic departments are straight losers, and it's only getting worse. So you're going to cut expenses by losing programs for sure, but you're going to increase your source of funds by attracting this money, but you have to increase profitability guaranteed. And you're going to realize that, wait a minute, if we do increase profitability, we don't want that money to be spun off to endow a science chair. We've got to keep that money within the athletic department because we're a business now. We are in the first inning, folks. First inning of the impact that the House settlement, the impact of paying players, NIL, all of these things. It's the first inning. You want to talk about what it is to have the line foggy between college sports and pro sports? It's so foggy, I can't even differentiate anymore. And now what these universities are going to become is franchises. They're going to become teams. The Penn State team that you can gamble on, that you can invest in. There is access now in unprecedented ways to the college game that is making the college game and the pro game act similarly. And when that happens, you get free agency, you get unions, you get lockouts, strikes, you get all sorts of things that you may not have thought would happen. The concept of unintended consequences is a business concept and a personal concept that is so often overlooked. And when it comes to this whole NIL deal and all the people going full Ray Davies and giving the people what they want, well, guess what you now have? You have private equity inside college. I got an update for you, Coca. It's a good one. Now, some of you may not realize, but coming up this Sunday, wouldn't it have been great for this segment if I knew the exact day that the Club World Cup, FIFA's Club World Cup, was starting, and I have some recollection? Jack, help me. I think it starts Sunday. We've talked about the Club World Cup. It's going to be shown Saturday. God dang it. All right, just cut it out. God, I've had 3 cuts today. 4869. I may have this wrong, but I believe FIFA's Club World Cup starts on Saturday. And it's going to be shown on DAZN. It's going to be shown on Turner Sports Networks, which we could talk about TNT and Max and all those other things. However, there's a fight brewing that we touched on between players and management, and it's a big fight, and I've got an update. The fight that we covered, I don't know, this week, it may have been last week, was the Seattle Sounders players, and the Seattle Sounders are one of the 3 MLS teams in the Club World Cup, that the Sounders players are upset. They're upset that they're not getting a bigger piece of the pie. Their view is, if teams have a chance to make up to $125 million, we should have a chance to make half that. Distribute all that to the guys. Let us make another $1 million or $2 million. And the cap is about $1 million per team under the collective bargaining agreement. So if you divide that equally amongst players, you're talking about $33K per player. The Sounders players said, you know what? I'm not sure that makes sense. Why don't we negotiate? So the Major League Soccer Players Association said that we are entitled to a bigger share of the funds. So we would like that larger percentage, and we would like to reopen the collective bargaining agreement to amend that provision that limits and caps what we can make in tournaments like this. What do you think the owners did of MLS? What would you do in your league when you're trying to build it around Messi and you've done a deal that's so messy with Apple that has not been the deal you wanted, where you have not become the fourth major sport that you expected to become and you thought that you had a good chance to have happen to you? Any thought what you would do? Yeah, you'd say, okay, we're happy to discuss this. We will officially open the CBA for discussion on amendment of this point, but we're not giving you that number. We're not coming close to getting you what you want, because what you're asking for is to be acting and treated as though you're in the NBA or NFL or NHL, which you're not, which we wanted you to be, but the facts speak for themselves. So the Sounders players say, but look, Inter Miami's building that new ballpark right by the airport, and we were told that team's worth over $1 billion. And Todd Garber said, okay, let's just hold up for 1 second. We try to tell people that the franchises are worth more because it makes our league worthy of investment. It means that we can charge more for expansion. It means that once there's a sale or a change of control that we're trying to get a higher value. Look what the WNBA did with the Liberty. You bring in an investment, you say the team's worth $425 million, and oh my God, the WNBA is the healthiest, greatest league. So, of course, we are promoting the fact that Inter Miami's worth over $1 billion. But I'm just curious, Mr. Union, have you seen anyone stand up and offer the Moss family about $1.2 billion for Inter Miami's football club? Just let me know. If you have, I'm in, like Flynn. My thought is you haven't. Therefore, what you're asking for, we're not giving you. So what do the Seattle Sounders players do? Through the union, they say, I hear you. I understand why you're saying it, but I don't know that we're going to play. And then management said, well, you're contractually obligated to play. As a matter of fact, under the collective bargaining agreement, there are provisions that discuss this very concept, that even with the cap that was negotiated, you have to play. You can't walk out. You can't say that we're overplayed, we're underpaid, we're tired, we're hurt. Give us you're tired and you're hungry. No. Get out there and play starting Saturday. But here's how this will end. Eventually, management at Major League Soccer will get together with the players union, and they are going to amend the collective bargaining agreement. And guess what? They're going to get it done before Saturday. That may sound like a crazy wait to see. Wait to see is when I tell you something's going to happen, and we'll keep track. If it does, fine. If it doesn't, fine. And you can find it on davidsamsonpodcast.com. There will be a new revenue sharing agreement that will be in place prior to Game 1 of the Club World Cup this weekend. And it will be a change that will allow for a larger sum of money to go to players, not a huge number, but it will be higher than the $1 million. Wait to see. Let's talk about right now the Rays and Blue Jays. I told you I wanted to get to that. Love the fact that we have the second hour to do so, because otherwise we would have run out of time. You're aware that both the Rays and Blue Jays are 20-10 over their last 30 games. That's something that's fine. You're aware of the fact that they are 4 games back of the Yankees in the AL East. You can look at the standings and get that yourself. You're aware that they've got 2 wild card spots. Again, look at standings. A little early for playoff seeding, but we're good. What you are also aware of is that the Rays are 27th in payroll and that the Blue Jays are 5th in payroll. What I wanted to talk about is the difference between the Rays and the Blue Jays as it relates to this season specifically. This season for Tampa is like any other season. They're not building toward a new ballpark. They have no deal done anywhere. They're not building toward the reopening of Tropicana Field because they don't care and people aren't going to come. There is nothing spectacular about this particular season, either in the eyes of the owners or in the eyes of the fans. It's just another day where you're making the donuts, and the Tampa Bay Rays continue to show why their front office is so spectacular and best in class. But it's my friends north of the border that interest me more. While the Toronto Blue Jays are not building a new facility with their owner, Rogers, they spent hundreds of millions redoing it, and it is phenomenal, the new Sky Dome. They re-signed their most important free agent when they overpaid Vladimir Guerrero. I mean, when they signed and kept Vladimir Guerrero. Why is this season so important? Because the front office, both Shapiro, president, and Atkins, GM, they are trying to prove a concept to their corporate ownership that the window that was open for them is still open, and that they are able to take advantage of it, and that their whole plan of keeping this core and then adding at the margins with free agents, that has proof in concept and that it's working. And that the Toronto Blue Jays are not the north of the border 51st ugly stepchild where free agents pretend they want to play but they don't, and woe is me. They are trying to change the narrative for an organization that won a World Series back-to-back in 92 and 93, who has not had playoff success since, who have doubled down on a core of players thinking that this would be the championship core, but it's not proven to be that at all. This is a team that started off terribly this year, with Vladimir Guerrero still, by the way, in his 14-year, $500 million deal. He is underperforming in a way that is eye-opening. But all of it gets thrown out in the trash if the team can actually play in October. And I'm not telling you that Toronto is the best team in the worst league, which the AL is. I'm not telling you that they are or are not a playoff team. What I am telling you is, by the Blue Jays playing the way they've played for the last 30 games, they have guaranteed one thing. And you heard Ken Rosenthal and I talking about who's a buyer and who's a seller earlier on today's show. The Toronto Blue Jays have to be buyers. The Toronto Blue Jays have to add to their team. Other than pitching, bullpen, starting, another bat, one more player on the bench, I can't think of one thing that they need. The reason why they will fill at least two of those holes is that they have earned that right by their play, and you combine it with a desperate owner and a franchise that needs to prove its worth and its standing in Major League Baseball, you get a first-class buyer. Can you be successful with as bad a starting rotation as the Blue Jays have had? They're ranked toward the bottom in Major League Baseball. You can, if you can outslug and you've got a lights-out bullpen. But the reality is they're playing without getting the great starting pitching that they need. They're going to get. Could they be a candidate for Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins? Will they be a candidate to overpay with some of their system in order to double down on their commitment to this core in this season? I would have said no originally, but given this last 30-game stretch, I've changed that to a straight yes. And while there is time until July 31st, I would expect the Blue Jays to act early and act decisively in order to add to a roster that is performing the way it is currently performing. Coca, can you imagine for 1 second something? Because I can't. Did you read about Hunter Dobbins, the Red Sox starter? I've heard of some dumb things before, but this one takes the cake. Hunter Dobbins is a rookie for the Red Sox who went public saying, if the Yankees were the only team that wanted to sign me, I would retire. I, of course, thought that was a misquote. I, of course, thought that I got, what's that word for when I get fooled on the internet? I got gotten. I can't think of the word right now, Coca. When you get fooled by something like the Impractical Jokers. Because I got. No, I wouldn't say that. That's a cool thing that young people say. I had another word for it, but it is I got. Thank you, Matt. Because when you're a player, have you earned the right as a rookie to say that, hey, I'll play for 29 teams, not 30? Does that sound familiar? Did it ring a bell at all? Because it rang my bell. It rang my Vladimir Guerrero bell. Do you remember when Vladimir Guerrero had said at one point, I'm not playing for the Yankees? And then he couldn't get a long-term deal done with Toronto, and he had to come out publicly and say, oh, God, that was then, this is now. I like the Yankees. Of course I'd play for the Yankees. Can you imagine the absolute stupidity of a player saying that there's only 30 employers, and I am going to MF one of the 30, and I'm going to come out and say that I don't know if I'm independently wealthy or I've won the Powerball recently or that I've even achieved free agency. Wait a minute, haven't even gotten to arbitration, but I'm already going to say no Yankees. You have got to be kidding me. Aaron Judge was asked about this. Aaron Judge said he was a little bit shocked and surprised that a player like Hunter Dobbins would say he didn't want to be a Yankee. Aaron Judge then faced Hunter Dobbins, and guess what Aaron Judge did to Hunter Dobbins? Aaron Judge went 436 feet to right center field. Goodbye. That's a home run. Now, I grant you, Aaron Judge hits home runs against just about any pitcher. But I also grant you that Aaron Judge had a special message behind that home run, which was not that I'm surprised you don't want to be a Yankee. It was, you stink so much that we wouldn't have you as a Yankee. And what better way to show it than by crushing him? What Dobbins will tell you is that his father is a diehard Red Sox fan and that he can't wait to play against the Yankees. He's going to tell you because if I'm front office, I am going down to the clubhouse and I'm saying, Hunter, you got to help me out here. We don't like the Yankees at all. Obviously, they're our biggest rivals. But what are you doing? Why in God's name are you saying that? Are you trying to tell us something? Are you trying to tell them something? Was your agent telling you to say this? Because I don't think so. Were you trying to make your father happy because you have daddy issues? What would have been the reason that forget scratching the tiger, but that, poking the bear? Coca, it's the end of hour 2. Forget poking the bear. This is just unnecessary, self-inflicted, Aaron Judge-induced rage. I never did understand why people did that in their lives. Why would you ever take the opportunity to burn a bridge? Why would you ever take the opportunity to limit the opportunities that you have? It's like never missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That's not a compliment. One of the first things that players are told by their agents when they're in high school and they're looking to get drafted is don't be Boras. Don't say, oh, I'm not going to play with you. I'm not going to play with you. I'm not going to play with you. Here's what you should do. Play with anyone who will give you a locker. Anyone who will put your name on the back of a jersey. And then, if you're lucky enough by some act of God to make the big leagues, don't do anything but say thank you and then do your job and try to get service time so you can be manipulated and maybe not be Super 2 and make some money in arbitration. But don't start off your career as a rookie doing this. So, I can tell you 2 things that will follow from this. Number 1, Hunter Dobbins is not going to say another word about the Yankees. 2, when asked about this the next time, which he will be asked, he's going to walk it back in a way that is significant. Why? Because he's going to get spoken to and be reminded that as his career develops, as he thinks about what he wants to do, he's got to remember what the name of this is. It's our new name. It's called Sports Business because it's just business. We'll be back tomorrow. This is nothing personal.